Okay, so Assalamu alaikum and greetings to everyone. Good evening from Dhaka, Bangladesh. My name is Mohammad Mainul Islam. I'm a professor in the Department of Population Sciences at the University of Dhaka and moderator of today's event, Let's Talk Population Development. I welcome you all to the fifth episode of this initiative. Let's Talk Population and Development is a series of conversations with academicians, researchers, policymakers, practitioners working in population and development. Since July 11, 2024, World Population Day, I have taken this online initiative with the support and interest of my current and former students, colleagues, and friends in academia and beyond, as well as those interested in population and development. So this 50-minute interactive online dialogue is open to all stakeholders. And this is a platform to discuss the practice of population and development and analytical work centered on policy to improve the quality of lives by ensuring their rights and choices as recognized by the International Conference on Population and Development, that is ICPD 1994. So, dear distinguished participants, you know that we are now in the era of sustainable development goals, where 17 SDG goals, 169 targets to achieve by 2030. We are only 5 years ahead of this agenda milestone. We have achievements, progress, and challenges to achieve further in this regard. And taking a particular goal like SDG Goal 5 as an example, at the current rate of progress, it will take another 300 years to reach the full gender equality. In 2024, UN Women estimated that globally, an additional 360 billion is needed annually to achieve SDG Goal 5 on gender equality and women empowerment. In this context of Bangladesh, significant investments in women have been made. Women are better educated, despite in many challenges. Girls are more likely than ever go to school. Gender parity in primary and secondary schooling have success. If you think about life expectancy at birth is almost 3.8 or 4 years higher in males than in females than in male. Women outnumbered men in terms of sex ratio, just we evidenced by the census 2022. And also the number of women in the labor force increased, but although differences are much more higher if you make a comparison. Unfortunately, large gaps remain in ensuring the meaningful representation of women. Women's labor force participation is lower in the formal sector than male. Early marriage, teenage pregnancy, or adolescence fertility are still critical, which are affecting to achieve demographic dividend and or gender dividend of the country. These are also critical to achieve many of the SDGs by 2030. So the SDGs for Bangladesh and other developing countries cannot be achieved without the leadership of women in the social, economic, and political realms. The barriers to progress, including discriminatory social norms and unequal power relations, need to be addressed. In this regard, today's topic of the talk is investing women and girls to expedite progress towards the SDGs. And in this background, during today's 50 minutes talk, we'll have a very distinguished personnel, Dr. Asa Torkelsson from the UNFPA Republic of Korea. Dr. Asa Torkelsson serves as a UNFPA chief of the Seoul Representation Office starting from the 1st May 2024. She brings a wealth of experience in international development, advocating for gender equality, sexual and reproductive health and rights, women, and youth empowerment worldwide. Dr. Asa holds a PhD in sociology, specializing in economic sociology, rural sociology, and gender studies from the University of Stockholm, Sweden, a master's degree in development economics from the University of Gothenburg, and a bachelor degree in international social sciences of the University of Stockholm. Dr. Asa is a sociologist and also a development economist with a career spanning of plus 25 plus years in the multilateral systems, like in FAO, IFA, and UN Women, UNFPA, World Bank, which are providing leadership and advice towards gender equality and women empowerment, serving at the country, regional, and headquarter levels. Since 2018, Dr. also has served as a UNFPA leader, starting as representative in Bangladesh, and since 2021 as a representative in Malaysia and also in country director of Thailand. So she is an architect of collaboration. She has made multiple evidence-based signature or interagency research and initiatives influencing new areas and audiences across the development and humanitarian nexus and upper middle income countries context towards enhancing demographic resilience and sustainable and just solution for the underserved. In her role as a UNFPA chief of the Seoul Representation Office, Dr. Torkelsson is continuing to strengthen partnership with the government of the Republic of Korea, civil society, academia, and the private sector, advocating further for inclusive policies and programs that empower individuals worldwide and promote sustainable development for all. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Åsa Torkelsson for her kind consent and presence during today's talk. Now, it is a time to hear from my distinguished guest, a devoted development practitioner, dedicated UN advocate, Dr. Åsa Torkelsson. And during or after her 15 to 20 minutes presentations, you can ask questions and comments considering the episode's allocation of time, 50 minutes. I will take questions from the chat room first. If you want to ask questions, please write your surname and your questions in the chat room so that Dr. Åsa Torkelsson also can see the questions there. So please ask your questions there. So you can also use raise hands function to ask question. I will try to address you all if time permits. And now I am requesting Dr. Åsa Torkelsson for her talk on investing in women and girls to expedite progress towards the SDGs. So the floor is now to Dr. Torkelsson. So I am now going to share one of the slides from Dr. Torkelsson. So,
Dhonnabat, Professor Mainul, and Assalamu alaikum to everyone. It is such a tremendous joy for me to return this evening to Bangladesh, albeit virtually, and to the beloved Dhaka University, which I thoroughly enjoyed our collaboration during my tenure in your beautiful country. I had the honor to serve, as Professor mentioned, from 2018 to 2021. And since then, as Professor also mentioned, I have been serving in Malaysia and Thailand, and then now in the Republic of Korea in Seoul. So, which means that my journey on the development and population matters has been a little bit different, coming from the context of Bangladesh, an aspiring middle-income country, to the two upper middle-income countries, Thailand and Malaysia, and now serving in the Republic of Korea, which is actually one of the key donors to UNFPA's work around the world. So my intention is to talk a little bit about what we do here in the Seoul Representation Office to serve UNFPA's mission worldwide, but also touch upon the critical issues as they relate to population and development that the professor has very elaborately outlined to all of us. And just before I take off entirely, I can recall that in 2021, when I had left Bangladesh, it had been years of volatility and a lot of changes, starting with the massive Rohingya refugee influx to Bangladesh in 2017, that we worked very hard to serve on from the day when I joined the office, through so many different challenges and associated climate-related risks, and cyclones, and in the refugee camps, there were always different challenges. And on top of all of this, we also had the COVID global pandemic. And I remain to this day and forever in awe and admiration of the resilience and the resolve of the people of Bangladesh to confront all of the challenges that were coming. So for me, Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh and the country of Bangladesh has been a tremendous teacher for me in terms of resilience and how we can overcome the stressors that come our way. And I think this is going to be a very critical skill, a very competitive advantage that you have coming from Bangladesh in a world that we see is confronting some fluctuations a lot of the time. Next slide, please, Professor. So just to recapitulate where we are, and I know Professor knows this very well, and I think some of the dear people in the audience as well know it as well. I come from UNFPA. We call ourselves the Reproductive Health Agency of the United Nations. We are working very with a laser sharp focus to make sure that we work towards zero preventable maternal death, and zero unmet need for family planning, and zero gender-based violence. And in addition, we are also the population agency, meaning that we are also the custodian on development data and data on populations, which is why you will see, for example, in a country, UNFPA very often actively engaged in the census, advisory activities, and also in the analysis of the populations and all of the different intersections. You may also have heard of us because every year we launch a report on the state of world population every year. And I remember that we launched it from time to time at Dhaka University as well, and with very strong presence from the academic institutions all around the world, and specifically in Bangladesh. So I wanted to frame ourselves in this very sharp setting where we now know what UNFPA's particular intent and mandate is within the United Nations family. Next slide, please, Mainul. So you will see us operating in about 150 countries with a heavy country presence, and the country office in Bangladesh is one of the largest country offices in UNFPA. We also have, at the next level of aggregation, regional offices. For example, in our region, we have a regional office in Bangkok that are providing the guidance for the broad lines and the directions of the work. And then we have representation offices, and you shall see our office in Seoul there, in the Republic of Korea. We have representation office in Tokyo as well, Addis Ababa, Geneva, in Washington, D.C., in Brussels, and in London, and in Copenhagen. And our focus is primarily to be maintaining and nurturing both the relation with the donor, in our case, Republic of Korea, but also with the needs of the UNFPA as an organization. So to be a kind of a prism which can facilitate the liaison and the relation and the resourcing in this case for that. So next slide, please. So, for example, here in the Republic of Korea, of course, Korea is one of the large donors to our humanitarian operation, UNFPA, worldwide. And if we pause for a second, and I think we all know that the development system is struggling with its financing. Many of the traditional donors also to the population agenda are showing less vigor in financing. And there are many other needs in the world that are competing with some of the development financing. So for me, it's been a tremendous, wonderful opportunity to be in Korea and to know that the country intends to serve and to help others the way it was helped itself when it started its development journey. So Republic of Korea has gone through a tremendous, consistent development journey, both in terms of the social indicators, but also in terms of its growth, which has been consistently high and placing itself now among one of the top economies in the world. And it has been reasoning in the same vein that if we are a strong economy, we should also be able to provide support to others. And in addition, this year and last year, the Republic of Korea was a non-permanent member in the Security Council, which means that there is also a lot of attention to the humanitarian agenda. Here we work, as we did in Bangladesh as well, due to the fact that, as you may know, from a population point of view, Republic of Korea is actually one of the examples of the ultra-low fertility situation. With, I think, the latest figures are at 0.7, which is way below the replacement level. So there are some very dire concerns in the country about the aging populations, which are rapidly unfolding, and how can this trend of low fertility be reversed? So, for example, here we are working very closely with the COSTAT, which is the statistical organization in Korea, to monitor many of these aspects and also to hold regular symposia regarding fertility matters and also on aging, generating policy advisory. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. We also work with the very dense private sector that we have in Republic of Korea and are trying to operate more with them. And then, of course, trying to work with the government, which is our closest counterpart, and the KOICA, which is the development wing of Korea, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is actually our counterpart in Republic of Korea. Next slide, please. So I wanted to jump over then to the issue and the topic of this this evening's discussion, namely on the SDG 5 and on the Sustainable Development Goal 5. And I think Professor already made a very good outline of the situation, namely that SDG 5 has seen some developments, but it's very much not on track to reach the goal by 2030. And as you mentioned, Professor, there has also been estimates that we are way behind, lagging in the financing of the goal number 5, which is around women's empowerment and women and girls empowerment on certain parameters. So I think some recent estimates actually said that it may take 132 years to bridge the gaps in gender equality, if we continue at the current pace. And these were figures recorded a year or so ago. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if the pace is picking up. So we feel from our agenda that we need to step up any action to protect the gains that we have made in this direction, but also to remedy it going forward. Next slide, please. So I wanted to bring back a little piece from my theoretical understanding, which I presented in my thesis in sociology, in economic sociology, which was for me, and it has been a helpful model in terms of talking about the resource distribution between women and men, which is a very stylized and a simple model. And of course, you will know in reality, the world is very much more complex. but science can allow us to prepare the models because they can enhance our understanding. So what I was positioning was actually a rural model where an individual in a rural setting and development context will have access to, say, 5 broad types of resources, which are financial or physical resources, the human resources, the health and education, the natural resources, and the social capital. Of course, there can be many more, but for the matter of simplicity, I started off with this model to see and could empirically validate that if we want, we can say that the resource portfolios of women and men are differently sized. Well, of course, it then becomes, if you see on the screen, the one to the left would be a woman's resource portfolio, which is smaller than man's. And in addition, it becomes more complicated because the aspect of resource activation or accumulation will be quicker when you already can possess some assets. So, for example, access to land will give also access to the social resources, will generate the financial capital, the physical assets, and the human resources, leading to a more quick spiral of resourcing for men than of women. Conversely, if you erode in one of these areas, you will see a depletion of the resources. So I've used that since my thesis in 2008 as a model to think about it. And just recently in the World Economic Forum, the gender gap report of last year, 2024, and I put here on the screen the figures for Bangladesh, because they are now actually using a similar model. Namely, they are looking at some of these assets to see where a country is positioned against a kind of an average. And if you are, or the aspiring situation would be that you are in the outer circle, that would mean that you have a perfect equality. Now you can see in a very quick snapshot, and I can invite you to consult the gender gap report if you're students and you're interested in this, because it does have a lot of data, and I think you can quickly see what the challenges are. So in Bangladesh, you will see the challenge is mostly in the inequality in access to the economy and the labor force participation, but also in the political sphere, which is where the decisions are made. Whereas the health gap has been pretty narrowed, and the education gap as well. So you know that better than me. You can inform me as well that the problem, of course, with all of these analyses is access to data, number one. And then, of course, to have access to gender disaggregated data. And so to allow us to make more nuanced analysis and interaction effects, for example, on the dependency on women, on men, and so on, and how over a life cycle the resources move, requires, of course, data. Next slide, please. So just to bring us back to say, very complex situation we are in, very underfunded situation we are in, very far from our objective we are in terms of the equality of women and men. In terms of UNFPA's agenda, we are globally, we are not there. Every day, 800 women are dying from preventable causes. Still, gender-based violence rates are very high. The child marriage rates are also very high. So if you break down and unpack these broad categories, you will see a lot of challenges. Now, I wanted to give you some examples then of what we can do, because I don't think perhaps that there is one quick fix that is fundable that can remedy the situation magically. They say gender equality is not a rocket science, but actually it's more complicated than a rocket science, I think. But what we need to do is to address many of the components. And I'm going to give you some examples of the work that I have been participating in that can be inspirations to you. Next slide, please. So this one is just to show you actually, and I cannot go through it in detail because we don't have the time. But if you find this presentation and if you are interested, it just comes to show how all of the different SDGs, the 17 SDGs, are actually interlinked. And also how they are interlinked and produce interaction effects that can be enhancing of, supportive of, accelerating the Sustainable Development Goal 5, but also how the Sustainable Development Goal 5 will also help to more rapidly reach the other goals. So coming from this perspective, it is one way to see that investing in SDG 5 will actually catalyze beneficiary spin-off effects throughout the different sustainable development goals. Next slide, please. So one of the things we have done, for example, recently, and I participated in a study in Malaysia when I was there with the Harvard Public School of Health, UNFPA, and the Ministry of Economy in Malaysia, was to actually estimate the return on investment for sexual and reproductive health and rights. That I felt was a very valuable tool in terms of engaging with policymakers who very often have on their mind the economic growth agenda, and to be able to convince them. And next slide, please, Professor. The one before. That we could demonstrate that there was a very positive payoff and return in investments in different areas related to sexual and reproductive health, our mandate, but also that could constitute profitable investments for the government of Malaysia, for example, on family planning, satisfying all unmet needs for modern contraception, what the rate of return positive would be for family support policies, etc. So when Professor was asking me to give some examples on policies that can work, of course, that's conditional on the circumstances. But I think one of the good ways is actually to do a study of this type, depending on what you need in your circumstances to provide the advocacy entry point for this agenda. Next slide, please. In Thailand, we took a little bit of another way, and we started to look at the life cycle approach, trying to look at the different needs of adolescent girls, and then women in our reproductive ages, and then also the elderly women and those who may be left behind. And instead of looking at these groups in a compartmentalized fashion, we introduced an innovation which tied them together in a digital platform that would offer the advice depending on where you were in your life cycle. But you would be part of a collective approach in terms of what women need in our changing circumstances. So that's another example of what you can do in an upper middle income setting. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned very briefly, we also host every year the Global Symposium in the Republic of Korea. And this year it was on low fertility and aging. And I actually have there the address to our website, which is hosted by our representation office in Seoul. And there you can find most of the videos from the interventions. You could also find all of the documentation. But we really did bring together, and we've done that on a yearly basis for I think 8 consecutive years. Of course, during COVID, it couldn't be held in person, but it was held online. So we brought together the leading thinkers in the world and experts to Seoul to actually elaborate on this topic. Both academia, we had civil society organizations, we had government representatives from here. We also did have private sector players, which we think are all part of the solution that is needed. Next slide, please. So for UNFPA, we are also increasingly engaged in the private sector and in the workplaces, and trying to make sure that they can be adapted in ways to cater for the sexual and reproductive health needs of especially the women workers. And we have also some return on the investment showing very bold results. And recently at the World Economic Forum in Davos, my colleagues were there with our executive director. And now many companies are signing up to be part of this particular movement. And if you know in Bangladesh that there is interest as well, I think this is a growing movement that is clearly knowing the benefits that it has. Another theme that is coming out is from the field of innovation on medicine that has for very long not sufficiently acknowledged the specific needs and the views of women. So there is a need to adapt the whole of the medical response for the big population group that women represents. And of course, looking in more detail to those who have different forms of disabilities, or if there are concerns of ethnicities, and that there are different groups that are underserved. We need granular data to understand where the underserved are. Next slide, please. So this is another slide to show our approach to the reproductive justice in the business sector. And again, if this presentation can be shared, it may be interesting for you to read in greater with greater attention. Next slide, please, Professor. Now I wanted to move over from the general picture how the Republic of Korea is working to support UNFPA and our work. And just before coming there, just to say that when I started in UNFPA in 2018, the humanitarian operation was not so pronounced. But now it's actually about 25% of UNFPA's portfolio. It's also an indication of the volatilities in the world. And you in Bangladesh know it perhaps better than many other countries, the different challenges that are coming, requiring new solutions. So one of the big funding areas that the Republic of Korea is really supporting is really to UNFPA's humanitarian work. But we are also supporting many of the other development country programs as well in many countries around the world. Next slide, please. So, of course, here our support is always not only from Korea, but in general to provide humanitarian expertise, but also supplies as well as humanitarian financing. Next slide, please. To move over to a specific program that we recently launched in 2024 is actually supported by KOICA and is UNFPA program, Conflict and Fragile program. It has $32.7 million over the next 3 years in very fragile settings, working in 6 countries in Mali, Central African Republic, Somalia, South Sudan, Lebanon, and Palestine, with different intervention in the area of sexual and reproductive health, but also in terms of reducing gender-based violence. It's a complex program because it involves 3 of our regional offices in Western Africa, Eastern Africa, and also in Middle East office. And of course, it's very complicated to develop a program under such complicated conditions. But I'm very pleased to be here and to be able to serve these countries from this side with the coordination unit that we have here with us. Some of the examples are here, the mobile teams in Mali, the dignity kits provision in Somalia, depending on needs. In South Sudan, also the dignity kit distribution. Next slide, please. The maternal health as well in Lebanon, and the shelter also that we have set up and are supporting in Gaza. Next slide, please. So since I'm coming to the end of this very quick presentation, just to have a little bit of a summing up slide from the current conditions when we are living in this context that is changing all the time, that we don't know today, for example, what will be the population challenges in a year, in 5 years. We can think, we can extrapolate, but when we think back on the formulation of the SDGs, when they were formulated, and now we have only 5 more years to go, but at that time, we had no clue about artificial intelligence, for example. That is a complete game changer with its opportunities, but also with its challenges that we need to keep track of. So the United Nations system has developed a new approach to say we cannot solve the problems of tomorrow with the solutions of yesterday, but we really need to look into the future and be open to what new solutions there can be. So the organization, the United Nations in its totality, in its 2.0, is looking a lot into understanding behavioral and behavioral psychology, the digital aspect, the artificial intelligence, the innovation, but also in terms of the forecasting. So on this screen, I actually brought with me 3 of the pictures from Bangladesh that we had, that even in 2021, when I think of them now, they were very foresightful. I think definitely number 1, we need to keep talking to the people who are doing the work. So I remember meeting the midwifery students and hearing all of their questions. And I think that is what we also need to do all of the time, to listen to the people. What are their needs? What are their concerns? They will know what the current challenges are. And then I remember when we went to some of the chars up north in Bangladesh on one of the missions, where the women actually, when there was a flooding and the chars are moving, so they are changing all the time, they had to rapidly change all of their housing and move and find a new steady ground. So they already had an expertise in terms of adapting with agility in spite of their tremendous hardships and very difficult situation. So I think it will be our challenge to see how can we help them as they go and as they move, where they need to go, where they need to find their way. And very lastly, we did an innovation actually in Bangladesh. We didn't in the end complete it, but we had a GBV virtual lab where we worked with broad civil society, different development practitioners in that time when we were under lockdown and we could only communicate by virtual means. We actually found a collaboration tool that allowed us to sit and figure out together solutions that we could actually undertake. So I think a lot of the work that I still today take with me from Bangladesh were very foresightful and can also teach the world on how we will be managing in the changes that are coming, that we don't know what they will be, but we will have to adapt to. Next slide, please. So this is just to say thank you very much, Donobat, and I welcome any questions. Over.
Okay, so I think let's say. So I think I would like to give my thanks to Dr. Åsa Torkelsson for her excellent presentations. And dear participants, we'll now have question and answer sessions. But I think I can go to the audience first. If they have not so many questions, then I may address a few questions to Dr. Åsa. So let me going to the chat room and then see. I can see that yes, 1, 2 questions already are there. So I think Dr. Åsa, I'm just reading it for you. I see there's Satman Zaman. He was saying that I'm a student. Oh, no, I am Satman. My question is, can you share any success stories where investing in women impacted SDG progress? Okay, then another questions I can see from Mr. MD Idris Ali. So Idris Ali, uh, Idris Ali, yes, I think his question to me is in the Bangladesh, social security of women is quite very alarming, especially in the workplace. Unfavorable working environment make women more concerned about their security. Women of rural area are more vulnerable. How can Bangladesh solve this security problem with proper investment? So this is and another questions I think comes from Sadman. My second question to Dr. Åsa is like, in context of Bangladesh, I think women's less representation in policy making, especially in politics, is the major reason behind investing less on women and girls, developing women's friendly programs. What is your viewpoint on this? Why are women still underrepresented despite having a women PM for decades? PM means women prime ministers for decades. And I think another 2 questions, then we can go to Asa because the questions are coming and ongoing, I think. So MD Shahadat, he's also a student of the Department of Population Sciences, asking that what is the impact of the Trump administration's decision banning funding from international organizations? Specifically, how does his decisions affect sexual and reproductive health outcomes? And another last question, I think I can see that this is Ibrahim. My question is about comprehensive sexuality education reality in Bangladesh. What it is shaping the overall gender equality? So I think Dr. Åsa, you have found multiple questions. So feel free to address anything else, answer, and then if you have more time, then I may come up with my questions to you. So floor is to you, Dr. Åsa.
Thank you so much for the excellent questions. I'm truly very glad because they show a very large degree of insight. As you know, also the theme is complex. So bear with me. My answers will not be completely exhaustive, but I will try to give some examples. For example, you were saying, can you give an example of some good example with a good impact where women's empowerment had a good result for the SDGs? Well, I would give the example of the reduction in child marriage, for example, in Bangladesh, when we saw that the rates were going down. And that was also attributed to a lot of the investments in the comprehensive sexuality education or in the youth clubs that were established also in the schools. So, which can also meet your question on the CSE, which I feel we were financing with UNFPA this work in a few select areas. And at the point of my departure, it was about to be scaled up throughout the country. So I think it's really about being able to demonstrate a good model and then to be able to scale it up. And Bangladesh, you have done that in many areas, especially also for women and girls. Another example, of course, is your heavy investment in the midwifery profession, which really did help bring down the rates of preventable maternal death, and also help to strengthen the health of children, of course. Now, the issue on women in politics is, of course, a big one. It's a long one. And for those political scientists who know on the electoral systems and how candidates are selected in the pipeline when it comes to the election time, you know that this is a very complicated process. And of course, I've seen also one of the explanation is, of course, women's time poverty. Because you know that as women, we usually have to manage multiple, duties, both in our reproductive and in our productive role. So what we can see is that maybe the time, this is my own maybe observation, there is maybe less time to also engage and also less access to the networks where politics are made. So those are some ideas from my side, but I'm sure you will find when you look into this problem, and if you want to write a paper about it, I will be interested to read it. Please send it to me to know what it means in the context of your country. You had also a question on, and also to say, I think there are many men who can engage in favor of women's empowerment. And so we also want, of course, to work very closely with men. So anyone can support a women-friendly policy for sure. And we hope everyone will support policies in the direction of equality. You were mentioning the impact of the recent change in the United States, and definitely we are worried because in the previous tenure, we saw a complete stop of funding to our organization. Therefore, the sexual and reproductive health and rights are definitely, we are concerned. We have, of course, followed closely the discussions on the stop of the financing. We are not quite clear on where we are with that and what will happen. We know that the impact would be very severe. The USA is a large donor to UNFPA, particular our humanitarian work. Their support has saved many, many, many millions of lives. So we really hope that it will continue. I think those were the questions, Professor, that I was given, but I maybe, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. So you rightly and wonderfully address all these questions. So now coming to you, because I would like to take some opportunity to access questions to you a little bit, but I will just say a few remarks or questions regarding, because you are a true friend of Bangladesh, and I can remember those days, how you worked at the time in Bangladesh. So you have a very good experience in context to Bangladesh. So my questions and remarks to you, first observations like, that now last year we celebrated 30 years of ICPD, and remarkable gains have already been made, I think, in terms of SRHR, what we are saying, sexual reproductive health and rights. But despite progress, we know that the worldwide, even for developing countries context, we can see that many women still face economic, social, institutional, and other barriers that prevent them from their working own decisions about whether, when, and how often with whom to become pregnant. So regarding these aspects, how do you evaluate Bangladesh progress so far with special reference to South Korea? Due to your work experience, can you say like that something? And you can also add another one aspect, because I can remember that you and I was a part of with your team at that time in Nairobi summit in ICPD 25 in Kenya, accelerating the promise. I think we have a good pictures, memories there, November 2019 in Nairobi in Kenya, where we got 30 commitments. Already you have said in your presentation too. So getting to 30s, that means the unmet need, no unmet need for contraceptions, no preventable maternal deaths, and no violence or harmful practices against women and girls, that requires ambition and commitment from all aspects. So many obstacles still lie ahead along a path that is neither straightforward or nor uncontested. But people have already gone far in claiming their rights and choices and will continue to do so. So how do you evaluate getting to 30s and women empowerment in context of Bangladesh? That is another one comments or questions to you. And thirdly, I would like to say one thing, like, that we are in a very good opportunity in terms of achieving demographic dividend, because we have a huge number of working age population at this moment. And we are also advocating gender dividends. So I would ask you that whether, as you are also in Korea, I think you also know their experience. So what policy options do you suggest based on the Republic of Korea, or even your experience, what you can suggest to achieve Bangladesh demographic as well as gender dividend in coming times? Because the time is short, but we need to go a lot or further. So these are the three remarks or comments or questions to you. If feel free, anyone or anything else, if you want, please, Dr. Asa.
Thank you so much, Professor. Those are very big questions for sure, but it also led me to remember that I had forgotten to respond to one of the questions, namely that on the safety and security, which I will address now in this wrapping up question. It will be difficult for me to have any pronounced opinion in this matter. What I know that what we did in 2021 was a very bold United Nations cooperation framework with Bangladesh, with the government, which was very bold and had gender equality. It was very novel. I think it was seen as one of the innovative works within the United Nations system. Gender issues were addressed both horizontally, namely across all of the pillars, labor, the environment, and so on. And in addition, it had its own pillar of investment. So I think at the time, there was really a very excellent lineup, a setup for channeled and very clear action in this direction. And I can recall that the issue on women's safety was of paramount concern. And we were feeling, as one of the colleagues mentioned in the chat, that yes, women are not safe in the workplace, not safe on the roads, not always safe in our homesteads, even. Not safe always in the schools. So this is not only in Bangladesh, but it is worldwide. The gender-based violence is paramount, and it's very hard to address, but it is a necessity to do so in order to have the peaceful and the conducive conditions out of which all of the other wonderful aspects will grow. And I remember that having that set up, there was also the promise that the World Bank could come in and contribute a lending at the time. Now, I haven't followed these discussions since, but there was every indication that there could be a very auspicious takeoff of gender equality in Bangladesh. Now I think that both the UNFPA program is coming to be evaluated at midterm, because I think the program we formulated is about to expire. And then the same with the cooperation framework. So that will give some very important answers to the questions that you are posing. And maybe if I may, coming back to the final word from my side, is to ask you, how do you see it? Where are we? Has Bangladesh taken off in terms of gender equality? Is the sun on the horizon? Are the changing going in that direction? And I'm looking forward to hear more. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, we are almost closing to the end of the talk today. We have three more minutes because we plan to finish it by 8 p.m. So I think, from this dialogue with Dr. Åsa Torkelsson, so we have to take some messages. So, we need actually what's from her presentations, she was suggesting about the strategic investment, life cycle approach, even for gender gap index and analysis to do further. So, and she was rightly saying that, this is not a rocket science, but sometimes it's more than a rocket science. That's really very critical aspects. And in these coming artificial intelligence, how the challenges will be advocated regarding all this context, that's we need to know further. But I think when women earn an income and control their earnings, and their children are more likely to attend schools, their families healthier, and self-worth improves, household income grows, and along with the economy. That's the economic aspects or economic empowerment aspects. And regarding strengthening the social care infrastructure, even in Bangladesh or other developing countries, you can see that unpaid care work by the women and create a decent work opportunities. We have to think in that aspects. And also, yes, please.
Can I come?
Yeah.
Because there is no option to hand raise. Hi, Åsa, how are you? This is Jackie.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
I cannot hold myself to ask a question
No.
because
Very nice.
Yeah, very nice. So, do you want to ask any questions?
I have a question. I have a question that how the Korean private sectors are engaged to advance the women's economic empowerment. So can we adapt something from Korean experiences?
Certainly, I think there are many ways to do, especially since Republic of Korea has been very concerned, especially on the low fertility side, and also to make sure that women's representation in the labor market. It's not perfect. There's still work to do, but there are some concerted efforts and some good examples to learn from. I'll be very glad to share them and to see if there can be an exchange of experience. We had the three of the partners in our symposium, the global symposium, Lotte Card, Hyundai, and then we had IKEA Korea. So we would be very glad to see if we can participate and even facilitate sharing of the learnings.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, Jackie, you're right. Thank you for asking this important question. And also, I think I know let's the time to conclude it. But before that, I would like to say that, well, we need change in social norms in aspects, particularly ensuring gender equality. So what I think at household level, within the communities, even in educational, religious institutions, even within spaces, but that means efforts and investment are needed to change the mindsets and give women the opportunity to thrive. So regarding that context, investing in women and girls, that means sets a direct path towards gender equality, sustainable development, and inclusive economic growth. So thank you very much for joining this talk. To you and all the participants, those who are attending here, we are expecting to have you again in our 6th episode in coming February 28. I hope so, if there is no problem then at the same time. And you will get an invitation to participate in the upcoming event. And I hope all of you will attend the event as well. And this is a recorded video, and this will also be uploaded on the Facebook page. Let's talk to Professor Mohammad Mainul Islam, and also in the YouTube channel we have. So you can go through and watch also if you have more time then. So please feel free to watch and share the videos with your network. So thank you everyone again. Please stay fine and goodbye for now. So I would like to conclude. So thank you again.
Thank
you very
you.
much.